Let's talk about relationships and relationship dynamics a little bit today. In any relationship, whether it's a romantic relationship or it's a friendship or a family relationship, whatever, there are always going to be differences between the two individuals who are part of that relationship. Most of the time, those differences don't matter. You drink tea, I drink coffee. Who gives a shit? We can still be cool. Those kinds of differences don't matter. You like sports, I like this. You listen to that music, I listen to this music, right? No consequence. Now, when those differences start to matter is when there are differences in things like values and beliefs. That's when you start to feel the friction. That's when things start to feel kind of weird. And when you're in a situation where stress levels are starting to increase and things like uncertainty start to kind of overwhelm people, what we have a tendency to do as human beings is to kind of retreat to our in group. And those in groups are almost always groups of people who share similar values and belief systems, right? So if you're in a pre-existing relationship and stress levels start going up or uncertainty starts becoming very prevalent or whatever, all of us have a tendency to kind of retreat to our in groups. Now, in this pre-existing relationship, what has been happening a lot lately, I think, is that person A retreats to their in group of people with shared values and shared beliefs, and person B kind of finds safety and security with their in group of people that have shared values and shared beliefs. And if those aren't the same groups of people, then instantly there's a divide. There's space that starts to develop between the two individuals. They may still care very deeply for each other, but in this instance where there's a hardening of values and beliefs and there's a seeking for safety and security, when they retreat to their in groups, there's instant space that's created. Now, when pressed, a person who is more invested in the system that aligns their in group than they are than they are invested in the relationship, that's going to create problems. And I think that's something very real, and I think it's something that a lot of us are struggling with, right? We have these pre-existing relationships. There's now this kind of moral or values-based divide. We want to try to maintain these relationships because we care a great deal about the other person. But if the other person is more invested in that part of their identity than they are with the part of their identity that relates to our relationship with them, it stings and it hurts. And the reality is that the tighter their connection to that in group, the harder it is to kind of break them from it and find that values-based alignment again. This is when you can get into conversations like identity politics or investing all of your identity into your political leanings or whatever it is, right? The more someone becomes invested in that, the harder it is to get them to invest time and effort and energy into other things like other relationships. Now, one of the reasons why it's so hard to do that and why it feels like no matter how emphatically you present your case to them or how much you work to try to save that relationship, you don't ever feel like you're making a whole lot of progress. And a lot of that is because there's this very real circumstance where social rejection shares the same parts of our brain in the insula and the anterior cingulate cortex that pain does, right? So when we process something painful, like physically painful, those areas of our brain light up. When we process social rejection, those parts of our brain light up. So understanding this, and when you have somebody who's like really dug into this in group because things are stressful and things are uncertain, and so they retreat to that safe zone, fear of social rejection by that in group is going to be more important to them than fear of losing another relationship that exists outside of that safety zone. That explains a whole lot. That also explains why things like peer pressure from their in group can drive people to do things that they wouldn't normally do. And so that's why a lot of times we see this, we're we're wrestling with this kind of cognitive dissonance where it's like, holy shit, who is this person? They're doing things that they never would have done previously. And it's all part of that social rejection pain response, right? That's why peer pressure can be so effective. Now, is there any way out of this? Yeah, maybe. Is there any way to save relationships? Maybe, but I would say probably not, as long as the stress and the uncertainty is still a factor, right? As long as people are instinctually being driven to their in groups with their like-minded, values-based belief compadres, it's probably going to be very, very difficult to save that or to rescue any kind of relationship that doesn't exist within that safe zone. Now, you got to understand this retreat to in groups is a very, very deeply ingrained survival instinct, and it's very, very difficult to overcome. So if anything does change that, the catalyst that's going to change their mind is almost certainly going to have to be something that happens within that in group, right? Some value is going to have to be violated, or somebody has to violate their trust or their belief system, or something has to happen within that group that drives them out on their own. Pulling from the outside probably isn't going to be very effective. I'm Ian. This is the Decency Rebellion.